According to the book of Genesis in the Bible, the first home of humans was the Garden of Eden. For those of you who aren't religious or aren't aware of the tale of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden was the place where they were created. It is supposed to be a utopia in which nothing is lacking and everything is just right. There was no sickness, no one died, and nobody went hungry. Due to the fact that Adam and Eve violated God's command not to eat from the forbidden tree, they were expelled from the garden. Since that time, human beings have been living in degenerated conditions, making them vulnerable to all of the problems that plague the planet. Thus, continue watching this video to get more information on the Garden of Eden. There is evidence of the Garden of Eden, and thankfully, many people believe that it is still out there somewhere, simply hanging around and waiting to be found. Yet, the Bible does provide some hints as to where it may be located. It is said in the book of Genesis that the Garden of Eden is located to the east. In addition to this, it is believed that the Garden of Eden was the source of 4 rivers, 2 of which are now known to be the Tigris and the Euphrates. Due to this, there are some individuals who are under the impression that the garden is located in the area that is today known as Iraq. After all, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers that we know today run through Iraq, which is located in the east. But the difficulty with this hypothesis is that throughout the course of time, the rivers have shifted their courses, and the geographical landmarks that are mentioned in the Bible do not now exist. As a consequence of this, it is likely that they did not even flow through any portion of Iraq at the time that the garden is claimed to have been in existence. In addition, if the garden were to be located in Iraq, why haven't we been able to locate it yet? After the flood, it is very improbable that the topography that existed at the time of creation still exists today. According to what is written in the Bible, the flood destroyed everything on earth. Thus, it is reasonable to suppose that a geological event of that size would modify the surface of the globe. But this does not rule out the possibility that the garden was ever located in Iraq at any point in the past. However, it does indicate that it is not there at the present moment, and that we are unable to find any proof of its existence there, since it was most likely buried under miles of silt. Even if Eden was around throughout the time of Moses, 1500 years after the flood, it is difficult for geologists to uncover any trace of it today. But several knowledgeable people believe that the most likely locations for Eden are either modern-day Armenia or Iraq. Thus, if a deluge of biblical proportions were to sweep across the earth, Eden would most certainly be forced below into the mantle, even if it were to survive the first onslaught of the floods. Because of this, it would need to be located someplace in the subduction zone on the northeast side of the Arabian Plate to be there. The narrator of the book of Genesis certainly stole the idea of a garden as an otherworldly location from Sumerian literature and used it for theological and ideological goals. And in order to comprehend the account of the garden that is provided in Genesis, one has to take into account the many locations and people who play important parts in the story, including God, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, the serpent, and the 2 trees, Tree of Life and Tree of Knowledge. But according to the account in Genesis, both the occurrence of death and the issues that have arisen between God and humans were only announced by God as a consequence of Adam and Eve's intentional act of eating an apple from the prohibited tree of knowledge. And it would seem that the Garden of Eden, much like the country of Dilmun, was a paradise of unending happiness where death did not exist. In addition, as a secondary consequence of Adam and Eve's transgression, God sealed off the tree of life by stationing cherubim armed with flaming swords to guard it. However, a further significant improvement made by the narrator of Genesis's account of the Dilmun Island is the substitution of Adam and Eve for God as the inhabitants of the garden in lieu of God himself. The theological comment on this passage would be that in contrast to gods worshipped in other cultures, the God of Genesis is not a self-centered deity. Rather, he is a God who actively desired to have a connection with human beings. In a nutshell, the Eden story in the book of Genesis may be understood to have 2 different purposes, depending on how it is read. Secondly, since the tale of Eden is preceded by the account of creation found in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 through 2, 4a, which concludes with the verse, "And God saw everything that he had created, and behold, it was very good," we might assume that God was pleased with his work. And there was evening, and there was morning, a 6th day. The tale of Eden gives an image of the full creation as very excellent, with interruption, Adam and Eve's disobedience in Genesis 2.4b through 3.24. Thus, this creates a contrast to the previous vision of the creation as very good. The tree of life and the tree of knowledge are two significant trees that God planted in the middle of the garden. Yet, it is easy for readers to forget about these trees. The so-called tree of knowledge has received far more focus than the tree of life. Thus, the tale serves a number of purposes, one of which is to highlight the significance of the phrase tree of life. But the only thing that God specifically forbidden Adam and Eve to do was eat an apple from the tree of knowledge. But why did God not specifically prohibit Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of life? Well, God gave them the order that they might eat the fruit of any tree, with one exception, the tree of knowledge. In other words, the narrator of the story of Eden has a reason to tell that Adam and Eve were also given access to the tree of life to eat from it. However, they disobeyed God's instruction and chose to eat from another tree instead. According to the narrator, the fact that evil exists in a world that was first created as very good is due to Adam and Eve's desire to become gods, which led to their hubris. They have to choose life, obedience, above death if they want to be the audience that the narrator has in mind, disobedience. When Adam and Eve disobeyed God, their disobedience caused a rift in the connection that God had with mankind. Death or evil as a notion has crept into the world that Adam and Eve, and not God, was responsible for creating as very good. Second, the story of Eden might be seen as an etiological fable that attempts to provide explanations for problems about the origin of humans. The account of creation found in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 through 2, 4a, has previously provided answers to issues about the cosmogony, which describes the activity that God did. According to the story of Eden, Adam and Eve were the first humans, and also the first parents to give birth to mankind. And the tale of Eden is an example of the kind of cosmogonic writing that was popular in the ancient Near East. Its purpose is to hypothesize about the beginnings of humanity and the location of its original home. It would seem that what one discovers in the portion of Genesis titled Primeval History is a collection of fables regarding the origins of human knowledge. According to Genesis, God's divine position was enhanced to the point where he did not need a physical abode, since doing so would simply interfere with his ubiquitous nature. Thanks for watching this video. Click the subscribe button and see you in the next video.